Hey guys, we want to thank Cap City Tees for sponsoring today's episode. That's right, Cap City Tees, the #1 printing company in Sacramento. Well, at least in our hearts. Cap City Tees is an amazing company putting out amazing quality at, most importantly, amazing prices. They are in line with any major retailer out there. Now, if you're in need of getting a shirt screen printed or embroidered, whether that's your local soccer team or basketball team or volleyball team or all the way up to corporate clothing, Cap City Tees is the place to go. So if you're in need or if you're in want, reach out to Cap City Tees at capcitytees.com or capcitytees@gmail.com. That's capcitytees@gmail.com. All right, guys, welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. It is a great day when we can have the brand new broker on the line with us. I'm so excited to have you with us. Today, we have Mandy Nardo on the line. She's going to be here. She's going to tell us about her experience and ultimately, hopefully, give us some great insight into what's going on in the real estate market. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
All right. We appreciate you being on. So the big news, I think, in your life, in the real estate world around you, is for the last, I think it's been almost 3 months, right? Maybe a week or so away from having your broker's license. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yep.
How's that feel for you? How's that going?
It was an amazing accomplishment. It just felt so good to finally do that after being in this business for so long. And I've been thinking about getting it for like 10 years. So to finally achieve that goal felt amazing.
That's awesome. So when did you first get into real estate?
It was April of 2010.
Okay, so it's been, quite a while now, right? You've seen a good up and down in the market.
Yeah, it's been really fun. When I first got into the market in April of 2010, we were basically in the crash. Like 50% of inventory was either a short sale or a foreclosure. So I got to see us come out of the bottom as we, broke through that, crashed market. And then now I've seen it go full cycle into a seller's market as well. So I've seen the full cycle of real estate at this point, which is pretty cool.
And what made you want to get into real estate? Was this your first career, or did you have a career prior?
Well, I'd been in sales for a while. I had done insurance sales while I was going to college, and then I was doing claims adjusting for an insurance company. And then I really liked a lot about that, but there were certain aspects of it that weren't really a good fit for me. And I just wanted to have a little bit more control over my workload and, my schedule and things like that. So my husband was actually the one that kept telling me to get into real estate. And eventually I decided to give it a shot, and I found a mentor and I just dove right into it and been doing it ever since.
So your husband says, "Hey, I think you should consider doing this." Well, I want to take a step back real quick because it's really funny you said insurance sales, because right now is a super tough market to get into real estate, to get into this year, last year, and the home loan side. And so I'm on a lot of forums on Facebook and Reddit, places like that. And there's so many people they're very upset. They're complaining they can't find work in the industry because they're brand new, so they have nothing that, or people who have been in the industry are getting laid off right now. And the most common thing I see on there for people that are like, "Oh, what should I do? What should I do?" is people say they should do insurance sales. And so it's funny that you mentioned that. You kind of came the other way, but
Yeah.
I always thought that would be kind of an interesting one too, because, depending on what kind of insurance you're selling, but I think a lot of those brokerages do like home and auto and health and things like that. Everybody needs insurance, right? So I always thought that would be an interesting way to go.
Yeah, I was a total weirdo in that I actually really enjoyed insurance. I thought it was really fun. Even as a claims adjuster, I thought it was really fun. I just kind of got it. But I think that sales in general is something that you either have an affinity for it or you don't. I think your basic skill set that you need to succeed in any sales industry is you need to genuinely like and enjoy working with people. And I think you need to be able to really truly understand whatever product it is that you're selling, and know how to apply that product to the individual that you're serving. And I think that critical thinking skills and abilities to like solve problems goes a long way too, especially in real estate, because we have to fix things that break all the time.
Right. Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the podcast with people, and understanding that there's a lot of different components to being successful in the industry, right? Making this career not just a side gig or a part-time. And sales is a big one. I think people think innately that's going to be probably one of the easier parts of the job or the career. And I always tell people that's probably the most difficult part, because it's not that difficult to learn how to do contracts, how to go back and forth to get stuff over to the inspections and things like that. That part will come with a little bit of time, but the sales is, and I always like to see people who had some sort of sales background come into the industry, because it feels like we're talking a very similar language, and that they've dealt with very similar issues that they're probably going to deal with when they come into real estate. So I always really appreciate that. But ultimately, your husband says, hey, I think you should do this. And you said that you had a mentor. Was this a friend that you knew, or did you just go to a brokerage and you were like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a realtor? And they're like, well, we'll help you out.
It was actually my husband's realtor that had helped purchase his first two homes. And we just had developed a friendship with him, and he knew that I wanted to get into it. And he said, well, with your background, I think you'd do great at it. And I just happened to kind of hit the timing right with him, where he had enough workflow that he could give me some overflow and some lead support. And he didn't have anybody else that was working with him. So I just took his overflow business and shadowed him, and that worked out really, really well for me. And that's something that I always tell any new agent that's getting into this business. The most important thing that you need to become a successful realtor is you need a mentor. You need a mentor who's going to work with you really carefully and closely. Otherwise, it's a very difficult business to break into.
Yeah, that's always a really, we've had a few people who it really depends on your personality, right? Some people, I think maybe if they come from a heavier background like that, or the reason they're searching out real estate is because they really want independence and they feel very confident that they understand how to be successful in this industry. And I find that those people tend to be like, well, I don't really want to be on a team. I kind of just want somebody to be there to answer questions when I need them. And then but I do agree with you. I think most people, they just don't see the full picture of how to be successful in the industry, and understand that while you're doing the actual job, which is getting people into home, negotiating contracts, and doing those back and forth, you still have to be doing lead generation for yourself. And it can sometimes be difficult without a mentor or a team base to understand fully how to keep business coming in through the door, right? So I agree with you 100%. I think that that's really the best way to do it. And unfortunately, I've found that a lot of people get really frustrated when entering into the real estate industry, because they don't have great systems set up to help them. And then that's kind of where we go back and forth. Well, what sort of brokerage should I go with when I first start, and things like that. And I think people have good things to say about big box. People have good things to say about small box, and they'll go back and forth on that. But ultimately, I like kind of what you did. Just find somebody you feel comfortable with, who's going to be able to give you the time that you need, right?
Yeah, because what I think people don't realize is, I think this is probably true of a lot of industries, but I definitely feel that it's definitely true with real estate. It's one of those careers that you look at and you think, it seems easy enough, right? I get to make my own hours. I get to look at all these houses. I mean, everyone thinks that's fun, right? I go over, my client says they want to see this house. I drop the contract and I collect a big paycheck. And it looks really easy from the outside. But then when you get into it, you realize that it requires a lot of skill and nuances and abilities in order to be successful. There's so many different parts to learn. You've got to learn how to work with buyers efficiently and guide them through the process. And you've got to learn how to market yourself to a seller in order to, win the listing. But that also requires you to know what it is that you need to do for that specific home. What is your marketing plan? What are you doing for that seller? And then I think a big piece that people don't realize as well is that as an agent, you also have to market yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough just to, go to listing appointments or try to find a buyer, but you really have to market yourself as well in order to keep your business flowing with, referrals and within your sphere of influence. So there's kind of a lot of different angles, I think, that you have to really dive into, and they're all very, very nuanced and different.
Yeah, the biggest struggle I'm seeing now with brand new realtors is that they're so ingrained in social media life. And I think that because at the forefront of social media, when you look at it from a realtor or home loan or people in our industry, those people are the loudest, right? And they're on their media and they make it seem like mostly like you're going to come into the industry and you're going to make $1 million your first year. And all you need to do is be consistent with posting on social media. And my background, I have a master's in media and public relations, and I've done consulting on brand development, things like that. So I know how important that aspect of the business is, and we talk about that, but we have to really kind of reinforce a little more old school style with people and let them know like, hey, like this is also a business where most of the time your success is going to come from person to person. Right. So you need to learn how to build those interpersonal skills. You need to learn how to work within small group communication, large group communication. And ultimately, you really need to learn how to master the art of creating relationships with people. And it's funny because the younger the realtors are that come in, I tend to see that that's more of a problem. And I think the pure fact, if you think about like when you were younger, you probably used to call people on the phone, right? Call your friend, let's go out. Same with me. I mean, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 17 or 18, I think. And even then, go ahead.
I was 19 when I got my first cell phone.
Right, exactly. So we're still used to calling people. And even when I first got into the sales specter, like it was a lot of phone calls, right? I'm making 100 phone calls a day. So I got very comfortable with that. And now you see a lot of people that are coming into the industry and they don't want to make a phone call. They're really apprehensive to do things like that. They're really apprehensive to go door knocking or just try to meet people in their community. And so it's interesting, like as a broker yourself, and as you start to build your team, I suspect these are the sort of things that you're going to be working on overcoming with people who are like brand new to the industry. I think they'll have a pretty decent time in like brand development or social media engagement and things like that, hopefully. But it's such a weird like thing to really develop someone fully within the industry, right?
Yeah.
So you have this buddy, he's helping you out. So are you doing mostly, what sort of deals are you doing when you first get into the industry that the overflow is coming through? Because I talked to somebody else and they were saying they were getting a lot of, they were essentially a buyer's agent.
Right.
And that's mostly what they were doing during that time. So what were you doing during that time?
Mostly buyer's agent. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I did kind of stumble into a few listing opportunities from buyers who like purchased a home and then had a home to sell.
Mm.
But the first 2 listings that I took, I crashed and burned really hard.
Mm.
I just didn't have the experience to handle the personality type and see some of the pitfalls along the way of the process. And that put a really bad taste in my mouth. But I really had an affinity for working with buyers.
Mm-hmm.
So I just continued for a long time working with buyers. I did about the first 8 years of my career almost exclusively working with buyers. I would refer any listing opportunities to the broker and mentor that I was working with because I was like, I just don't want to do it. I had experiences. It's not for me. I really like working with buyers. And then one of the listings that I had attempted to refer was a client that needed to buy and then had a home to sell. And it was a personal friend of mine that I'd known for a long time. And even though I was not technically their listing agent, they just innately kept coming to me with their questions. And it allowed me to put my toe back into the pool of listings. And I found that it was a totally different experience once I knew more about the process. I'd been in the business for longer, and I already had a really good working relationship with this client. So after that experience, it went really well. And I thought that was actually fun. And I feel like that was a success. So I thought, well, as long as it's somebody that I already have a relationship with, I feel like I'll start taking listings. And eventually I started learning how to do listings that way. And then now I have enough experience doing that, I work with all different types of sellers now. So I did eventually transition into that. I do believe that starting the process as an agent working with buyers is ideal. I think that it allows you to learn the contract that way, and it just prepares you better. I think that sellers can be a little bit more challenging. And so I do encourage people that I'm training and mentoring to focus on buyers and then work their way into listings. And what I've been doing is allowing those people that I'm training and mentoring to come along with me to listing appointments. And then I share with them what I'm doing through the process and allow them to experience it vicariously. And then prepping them when they get ready to go on their listing appointments. So I'm trying to make sure that they don't have the crash and burn factor that I had. But I will say that one thing that I think is kind of neat is that working with buyers for 8 years straight gave me a really good sense of what buyers want, need, what their process is, what their thinking is like. Because you start noticing so many things that are repeated factors, right? So when there's certain things about a floor plan or characteristics that houses have, there might be, 80% of the buyers that I worked with through those 8 years that were like, we don't like that. We don't like that. We don't like that. And so now when I go on a listing appointment, if I identify certain things, and it works both ways, right? It can be either things that the majority of buyers are going to love, or the majority of buyers are going to hate. And then I can now coach that seller and say, that is something that buyers are going to really love about your house, or it's an objection that we're going to have to work with. So I do think it gave me a really good experience working with those buyers. But I do think that working with buyers to start is an ideal way to learn the business.
Yeah, a lot of people don't fully understand that, although they're very similar because it's real estate, working with buyers and working with sellers, it almost feels like a totally different job. And working with listings with sellers can feel really intimidating when you're brand new because you don't really know, like you said, you don't really know what people want out of houses. You don't really know. I mean, you see kind of stuff on TV. Like if you're watching Selling Sunset, you're like, am I supposed to stage all these houses? Like what am I supposed to do? And the other thing is that people are extremely attached to their houses more times than not. And they feel that this is a very personal thing that we're doing, selling my house, and that I believe that this is what it's worth because I lived here and I know that I put this screw into this board and whatever it is. And so they feel very passionate about that. And I have some of my realtor partners that I work with, and we have this conversations because I'm mostly working with them from the loan side. And especially as we had this huge transition in the market where rates started to go up, and people almost always want to try to maximize how much house they can get. I'm like, hey, like this is moving so quickly that I understand they're very passionate about what's happening in their house, but their house isn't worth that anymore. It's not worth, and you know what? Next week it's going to be worth 10,000 less. And the next week after that, it's going to be worth 20,000 less. And so let's jump on a call with them. Let's have this conversation. Let's paint a realistic picture about that. And that's just something you don't deal with on the buyer side. On the buyer side, you have your own different sets of struggles. And I commend you because I always thought that the buyer side was a lot more tough because of how much driving you have to do and how indecisive people can be. And that's mostly because when you go look at homes, a lot of times there can be just like great aspects of each home. And you kind of wish you could like Frankenstein all of the houses into one perfect one. And so they almost have to choose like, well, I love this kitchen or I love the way these bedrooms are or whatever it is. But it's interesting, those differences. And if you're brand new and you're coming into the industry, it's important to understand that, like, yeah, you'd think that you want to do one or the other, but you really just need to take kind of what's there and learn how to do it and learn how to apply those on both sides, especially as it pertains like contracts, negotiation and things like that. So you're doing kind of this work, and are you on the same brokerage for those full 8 years?
Not exactly. What I did is I worked for the same broker and mentor
Mm-hmm.
for, I can't remember how many years it was, till about 2014, I think.
Okay.
And then the brokerage started to shift and change a lot, and the
Mm,
dynamics within it changed. So I decided to go out and try something new. I went and worked for another broker in town, and that was great. I do think that there's something to be said for loyalty, but I also think that for agents, there's something to be said for experiencing different brokerages and
mm,
different leadership, because you just don't know what you don't know. And I think only learning ever from one person and one brokerage will leave you with some gaps.
mm,
So I did work for another broker for a while, and then I took a little bit of time off. And when my kids were really little and I was having babies and toddlers, when
mm,
I went back to work, I approached both of those brokers, interviewed each of them, and they decided to go back to the original one that I had worked with. And then I was there up until last March. So the vast majority of my career I did spend with that one broker. And then my circumstances changed and I decided to go to a different brokerage. And that was just kind of a place that was an interim spot for me until I got my broker's license. And then I decided that I needed to just go do my own thing. And a big part of why I wanted to do that was because I really enjoy coaching, training, and mentoring new agents. And
mm.
it's really hard to structure that when you're underneath a broker. It's much easier to do it when you're just the broker and you don't have that third person, involved in the process. So,
And so for this entire time that you're doing real estate, you're out in Redding, California, right?
yes.
Redding. Okay. So Redding, if you guys don't know, I want to say it's about 2.5 hours north of
Yes.
Sacramento. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're out there, you're doing that. So it's really interesting, right? So you're doing this real estate. I haven't really had this conversation with anybody, but I'm curious, as a mother and doing real estate, how did you find kind of the flexibility of being in real estate and being a parent and being able to kind of do that? I know you said you kind of took a break, but I'm sure there was some overlap there. And I think it's interesting for people who want to get into real estate and maybe they want to do it part-time, or maybe they want to find a way to do it full-time but balance with their families. It's sometimes, when I talk to people, say it can be really difficult because you typically are working when other people are not working. So
Yeah.
that's when people are off of work, that's when the weekends are, and you're still expected to be available during normal working hours because that's when lenders are open, that's when inspectors are open. And so I'm wondering, as a family dynamic, how did that work for you? I don't know if you have any other friends that are in the industry who are in families, and maybe, if you guys have like stories, but I'd love to hear a little about that.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. I think it's a tough balance for all moms, probably across the board. But real estate makes it especially tricky because your schedule is very unpredictable. So when I first got back into real estate, when my kids were really, really little, I had them in preschool, which allowed me to have some structured hours that I knew I could dedicate toward my business. I had a babysitter that lived across the street. So if I needed to run out for an appointment to go show a house, I had
Mm-hmm.
someone that was almost always available to help me. And then I would also lean on my broker a little bit. My broker would either cover an appointment for me if I couldn't find childcare, or sometimes he would say, just drop your kids off at my house.
Mm,
Well, I had multiple different lifelines where I could pivot if I needed to do that. And then it's just been a balancing act as my kids have gotten older. I think that's one advantage of when you get to a certain point in your career where you are getting more listings. Listings are easier from a scheduling perspective because you're
mm,
generally scheduling those appointments in advance, as opposed to when you're working with a buyer, they see something come on the hot sheet and you're running out to go see it, usually as quickly as possible. The other thing is that as I've gotten to where I can train and mentor new agents, if I have a client who I know is mostly going to be an evening and weekend buyer, then I team up with that agent if they have better availability for that schedule. And then we
mm.
work together where they can be kind of the boots on the ground and do that. So that's something that I do too. So I've always relied on having a lot of different strategies throughout the years of being able to have different lifelines depending on what the needs of the business were. It's a lot easier now that my kids are both school age. So they're in school Monday through Friday, traditional hours. As they're getting older, their school day is longer. So I have a lot more time, to have a more traditional work schedule. But then it's nice that I can work from home when they're home, if one of them is homesick or, like they're off school for that day. So that is a nice part of real estate, is having that flexibility.
Yeah, it's always, my wife and I, we don't have any children yet. And so my broker does, and that's mostly who I work hand in hand with. And he has three children. One is a teenager. The other one is, I think, 6 now. And the other one's 8. And so I've been here for a while, and it would be fun. We would say, hey, let's meet up at the brokerage at 9 a.m. And he would come at 11 a.m. And I never really understood what was going on there. I'm like, hey, like I'm here, what's going on? But when COVID happened, we were doing a lot of mortgage business still, and we really needed to be working together. And so we were working out of his house. And that way we weren't running around to anybody else. It was just our family and his family. And we did that for almost a year. And so I got to see his kids go to school. I got to see his kids come home. And I got to see, if they needed to go somewhere, what that looked like. And it'd be like they needed to go to, let's say, some sort of meeting. And there's 3 of them. And it would be like, all right, one kid's ready. So they're trying to get 2 kids ready. And then those 2 kids are ready. And then one kid has to go to the bathroom now. And then one kid took their shoes off. And I'm like, oh my God, like now I fully understand why it's taking you so long to get places, because it's just like a roller coaster of trying to get all of your kids ready at one time and then make sure you have everything. So I just always thought, man, it's being a parent and being in real estate must be pretty tough. That's what I've always thought.
It is a tough thing to balance. And my circumstances are that my husband is a fireman on top of it. So he's gone for 24 to 72 hours at a time, and I'm running the ship by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you have to be creative, and you have to have a bunch of different opportunities available to you. There have been times that, like during the winter break, I'll take my kids to the local trampoline park, and I sit there with my computer and work, and they go jump around and all that kind of stuff. So I think you just have to be creative and resourceful, and, sometimes have different opportunities available for what you can do. And I also try to make sure that I'm having a good balance of spending that time with them when they're home and getting all my work done as much as possible when they're at school.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that'd probably be the only way you'd be able to do it. And then even like when they get off school, right? I mean, that's pretty tough because they're all amped up, and then you have homework and you have to feed them. And
Yes.
if you have sports and other, extracurriculars, I was a coach for about 13 years, swimming and wrestling. And so I saw how compacted these kids' schedules are. And I was just like, it's more so than even when I was young and I was a 4-sport athlete. I was just like, it's crazy how, and, I see the kids and how busy they are. And then when I was younger as a coach, I just never really even thought about parents. I was just like, that's a lot for a kid. And now I think, oh yeah, they need to get there somehow, right?
Yes.
Somebody needs to get them there, get them home, and make sure they're fed. And so, yeah, it just all falls back on the parents. It's crazy.
Most of my clients are very understanding. They know that I'm a parent, and they know that I'm going to handle their business, whatever they need. It's not going to suffer, right? If they go see that house, I'm going to get them into that house. But they understand. They know I have kids. They know that in the afternoons, I'm going to be busy getting the kids to their activities and doing those things. And that's the great thing about technology now, is like texting makes it so much easier to just, multitask and do all those things at the same time. But I find that most people are really understanding about the family, life that people have as well.
Yeah, it's so critical. We talk about setting expectations with clients and really learning how to vocalize your schedule, your availability, and to hold them accountable as well, right? And I think for me, I've always been the type of person where I'm just like, I'm always available. That's just how I am. But I know that's not functional for a lot of people. And they get really agitated and they get really burnt out because they're like, oh, these people are calling me like 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. And, they're the whole weekend I was trying to spend time with my family. And so we have to have those conversations about setting those expectations like, hey, and I had one guy who I thought, at first, I thought it was a very odd voicemail. I was my wife and I were trying to buy a property out in Elk Grove, and we couldn't get a hold of this realtor. And his voicemail essentially said that I'm very busy, but it is important to me that I will get back to you within 24 hours. I reply to phone calls twice a day, one at 10 a.m. and one at 5 p.m. And I thought I was like, that's so odd. I've never heard anybody do that because normally it's at your advantage to like be available and to return calls quickly. But I thought, well, if you're a very busy person, you're doing really well in the industry, that's a great way to set up your business. And it was kind of like that thing where I told my wife, I'm like, well, don't even ask me about this property because we're not going to hear back from this guy until tomorrow, at least around 10 or 11. So, I think setting that up, and you probably have gotten pretty good at that, I would imagine, is setting those expectations.
Yeah. And again, I think those are just some of the nuances of why anybody thinking about being an agent needs to mentor with someone who can help them learn how to manage, those types of situations with their client. Because if you don't handle them right, the client's going to move on to a different agent. But I have had conversations with my clients about that up front, especially buyers. I think buyers, especially when they are looking for houses and they just start texting you listings that they're interested in and questions and that type of thing. All of my clients know that I am an early to bed, early to rise person. And I always tell them my phone goes on do not disturb after 8:30. So you can text me, just know I probably am not going to respond, but I'll get back in the morning. And then we end up joking about the fact that while they're sleeping in, they wake up and at 6 a.m, I've been responding to them and sending them all of their info. So I think people are usually very cool about it, but it does just require a little bit of setting expectations. And I think people will, if you're responding to text messages late at night, people are going to continue to do that. You have to set expectations from the start of what your working hours are. People will learn them, and most people, I think, are really understanding about it.
Yeah, we have this conversation from from a coaching perspective where we talk about when you're trying to schedule an appointment with a client, give them times to schedule it with you because it's important to set an expectation that you have a schedule and that schedule should be abided by, right? I think because we work in this industry where we create our own schedule, a lot of times we feel very much like I can talk to you anytime for 12 hours, I'm available, right? But when you start to do things like that, you start to devalue your time structure, right? And this comes a lot back to the experience and what you're probably going to be coaching people on is, there's certain blocks you should probably have in your day or within your week that you're doing certain things. And if you're just saying I'm open 12 hours a day, you're probably not blocking your schedule out very well to bring in new business, to network, to market, to do things like that. If you are doing that, you don't have 12 hours available every day, right? You have a couple hours to take calls and really dedicate that time. So I'm curious, you've been in the industry for a while and you must have developed essentially what I would consider a philosophy and ethos or some sort of ethics around how you want to design your business. And I'm sure you've learned from other brokers and other realtors. Do you kind of want to touch on that a bit and what sort of expectations you're having for your brokerage and people that are going to be working with you guys and anybody that would be interested in joining your brokerage? What do you want them to have? For us, we really focus on building career realtors. And so I understand there's people that want to work part-time. We understand that there's people that only want to be in real estate for the money. That's not really our thing. We're career realtors. We work from an ethical space, and it's really client oriented. We don't do huge numbers. Really focus in on creating experiences for repeat business. I'm curious, what are you guys going to be all about? And actually, I don't know if you have a name yet, but do you have a name for your brokerage?
Yeah, the brokerage's name is going to be Seasons Real Estate.
Okay.
Currently just waiting for the DRE to finish processing my application for a corporate license for that name, and then I'll be able
Great.
to launch it officially.
Hmm.
So I chose Seasons because I think that it's a nod to the fact that people generally buy and sell real estate based on the season of life that they're in.
Mm.
So that's going to be the name of the business. And it's been really fun, honestly, thinking about what type of a business I do want to create and offer to clients and agents. I think that I tend to be more of a philosophy that I like small but awesome, right? So I don't envision having hundreds of agents. I'd rather have a close knit team that's organically built of people that all really like and trust each other. And I think that every person that joins the team has to be the right fit. They have to be somebody that our philosophies and our business ethics align and that type of thing. Because I want the brokerage as a whole to be known as a brokerage that has agents that are very respectful, that know what they're doing, and are going to take good care of the client and just be a good, reflection on the business as a whole.
Hmm.
So I think about that, and I do also. I picture having a mix of both newer agents and experienced agents. I think that will balance each other really nicely. But I think that one thing that really stood out to me when I left the brokerage I was at, and then I went to another one, and then I know a lot of the brokerages within my area really well because I've been in the industry here for so long.
Hmm.
And I couldn't find one that quite offered everything that I was looking for. And I thought, I feel like there's a gap here, and maybe I can meet that gap with my brokerage, for other people who are seeking something similar to me.
Hmm.
I think you were talking about it in one of your recent episodes about the agent that just closed up his shop and let go of all of his agents because he wanted to just focus on
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but I thought that's actually kind of what I picture doing too, is more of a direct mentorship, even with an agent that has a little bit more experience that isn't super green, teaching them how to really market to their sphere of influence and get repeat and referral business, how to market themselves, how to develop their own brand. There's a lot of brokerages, and this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it, but there's a lot of brokerages that are more about having the agent promote the brokerage, right?
Mm.
And I want to teach agents how to build their own business because I think that's where their success really lies. And I want the brokerage to be a tool for them to do that. So that's kind of where my philosophy is at this point in time with it.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Ryan Pineda. He's out of Vegas now, I think. I still like irks me really bad.
Yeah.
Even though I totally and that this is a very interesting thing about where our industry is going. We talk about how like maybe in 10 years or 15 years that the state might step in and create some sort of pay structure for realtors. I know a lot of people are really they have a hard time understanding how realtors get paid, and why they're worth what they are. But I understand what he did, right? And he's a huge influencer. And so he's essentially realized that to leverage the most amount of money to just get rid of all his realtors. And I thought, man, that's not very cool to just like say, hey, good luck, find you whatever. But no, I like what you're saying. I really like that idea of focusing on building an individual's business and understand that the brokerage is more of a resource. I think that's the way that we're probably going. And you're seeing a lot more as well of like not big box with brick and mortar, right? A lot more. We're learning how to build a business in the era that we're in, which is online, right?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to manage. It's a hard thing to bring people in. And then also, how do you help them be successful without them always being around you? Um, is really difficult. And then understanding that, you know, some people really need their hands held. And other people really just don't want your help at all. They just want to be under you, and they like you, and they like what your brokerage stands for. And so I think it'll be really interesting. I'd love to have you on in like a year, and once you have some people under you, and just really talk about like that experience of having a new brokerage, and all of the learning curves, because we talk about how difficult it is to open a brokerage now because of the overhead, because of the E&O insurance, and understanding that like you don't make money until they make money. And I'm curious, is part of your plan to transition yourself out of production, or do you intend to stay in production forever?
I am planning to stay in production for as long as it makes sense for me to do it. And that's because for me, I believe that in order to really work closely with training and mentoring agents, you're a more effective trainer if you're out there and you have your boots on the ground too. When you're out there offers and testing the market on how the offers are being responded to, when you're listing properties and seeing the amount of showings and offers and where those offers are coming in at, I think that's really valuable hands-on experience, because our industry is one that the market shifts and changes and ebbs and flows all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not out there doing it, you don't have a pulse on it. And so I think that having that pulse on it can be really, really effective. And then you can learn what strategies are working. Like when we had the really competitive market we've had over the past 2 years, you had to really know how to win a multiple offer situation. And so that's me practicing, via writing offers for my clients. And then I found some strategies that worked. And then I shared those with the team that I was working with at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a big reason that I want to stay in production, even if my team got big. I think it gives me valuable experience to then share with them. Plus,
Yeah.
I really like doing it too. I truly enjoy buying and selling real estate for my clients, and I think it's really fun. So,
yeah, I always thought that would be the hardest part of being a broker, right? Is that transition, because realistically, right, if you want to be a very effective broker, and I mean that in the way of owning your own business, being a coach, be development, and still giving your time to do all of the necessary legal auditing and all of that fun stuff that goes in with the DRE. I thought, well, how many realtors could you effectively have under yourself without having an associate broker that's managing with them, right? And still be able to do the production that you want to do, right? And if I always thought the people that become brokers are typically high producers as well, right? So going from doing 10 deals a month, and then you have all of these, let's say you have 20 realtors under you, it can be really tough unless you create that coaching partnerships, because I know you want to have more established realtors and newer realtors, and maybe having some sort of partnership before them, or having associate brokers on to kind of take some of that off, or whatever it is. But it's such an exciting thing to be a brand new broker and to be able to make those decisions as you move forward. And then I think at some point, you're going to be like, well, maybe I can only do 2 deals, a month or something like that, or whatever it is. Or I really like what I'm doing, and I'm going to bring in the associate broker in to do that. So I think it'll be really exciting to follow your journey and to see how all of that develops. And you said something earlier that really resonated with me. And I think a lot of times people listen to the podcast, or they just listen to people talk about real estate in general, and they hear people talk about like, oh, I want to have a brokerage that has ethical people, that has people that are doing the work, and they're kind and they're respectful. And you think, yeah, of course, like that's like a standard. Why wouldn't it be like that? But I'm sure you have some horror stories that you could tell about realtors who were not respectful, and who were not great at the job, and who you probably never want to work with again. So it isn't as easy as just being and thinking that, yeah, the first 10 people that are going to be the right people, because not everybody can do the job effectively. Not everybody has good emotional awareness. to do the job and not cause huge problems for everybody. And then, so I want people to understand that. And, for you being in the industry for this amount of time, hoping you haven't had a lot, but like, would you say like maybe on average, maybe like once a year, maybe every couple of years, you get those realtors that are really tough to work with?
Yeah. I've worked with some that I had in a training capacity that I just felt weren't a very good fit for me,
Mm,
various different reasons. And I've definitely encountered agents, unfortunately, far too often that aren't very respectful or professional in how they engage. And that's actually a big part of Seasons Real Estate. On our website, the second screen that you scroll to is going to say the company's mission statement. And the mission statement effectively says, we're professional, experienced agents who are going to put our clients first.
mm,
We are respectful professionals and partners with our fellow real estate agents. And we are a company that knows that people are the heart of the company, and we value every person and their own journey and support them.
mm.
And those are just things that are very important to me. So anybody that approaches me about joining the brokerage, we have to have a conversation about that. It's going to be in the independent contractor agreement that you need to read the board rules for our local MLS association. You need to know and understand the rules of the MLS. I think there's too many agents that don't understand those rules, and maybe they're breaking those rules because they never read it, or the code of ethics. There's a lot of things like that nobody really trains on. And I think just setting expectations with them that, you're going to encounter agents who aren't going to be professional or respectful to you, but you can't control them. You can only control yourself. And
Mm.
I don't know how terrible someone is acting, we're still going to be professional. That's just very important to me.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that in my experience, the people that have been the rudest have also been the worst at their job, and they're typically upset because they did something wrong, or they think something is supposed to happen in a certain way that isn't in line with the guidelines or rules or regulations, and so you have these conversations that escalate, and then you're like, hey, look, just go read the rules, right? Go look at this. That's not how it works. And we even have this issue sometimes with underwriters, and we're like, that's not a Fannie or Freddie guideline. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't care what you guys think the rule is. That's not the rule. Like, here's the guideline. So it's just so interesting to have that sort of dynamic in our industry. And I guess it's everywhere, but the significant difference is that we're not in like an office building, right? We don't have an HR department or whatever. I mean, some large like Keller Williams or whatever will have stuff like that, but the general idea is that we're working on our own capacity, and a lot of brokers are not fully in tuned with the day-to-day workings of their realtor as far as it goes with the conversations they're having and how well they're treating the other party. But I always think that once we get into contract, we're all partners, right? I mean, it's not me against you. It's all of our jobs now to get this closed for the benefit of every single party that's involved. And a lot of people treat it like we're enemies. And that's where the kind of the battle comes in. I'm like, hey, like, I want to get paid just as much as you do. I want to make sure title gets paid, escrow gets paid, inspectors get paid. I mean, and I want to make sure our clients get what they want, mutual benefit, right? So it's such an interesting thing navigating that sort of sphere. So you're getting a little bit, oh, go ahead.
I have a pro tip for any agents out there that struggle with other agents that are being rude or disrespectful to them. As soon as an agent shows me that they're not going to be respectful or professional, I do not ever have a phone conversation with them again. I move everything to writing only.
Mm.
Your call right now, please send me a text message, or
No,
please.
yeah, that you're 100% right. That way you have a paper trail of everything that's going on,
Yeah, and
and it doesn't escalate as much.
people have a much harder time being rude to you if they know that it's written down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a trick that I've been using for years, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So you're getting closer to having, so is your website up yet?
No, not yet. I have
No,
to
not
wait
yet.
for the
Okay.
DA to approve me to operate under that business name first, and then I'm going to launch it.
So I know the DRE's been really backed up. I don't know if they've caught up or not, but I know in the last couple of years, it's taken months and months and months. I know we had to do a corporate changeover for because we have a home loan side and we have the real estate side, and so we moved our NMLS over to the DRE under them, and it took probably 5 months to get that done. I don't know. Hopefully, yours is going much quicker. Is that kind
Yeah.
of what you're feeling?
Yeah, it seems like to get the corporate license done, it's been taking 4 to 6 weeks. Although I did notice, so I submitted my application on December 21st, and they were working on December 12th last time I checked. But I did see that they just cashed my check, so I'm hoping that means things are going to
Yeah.
move. I feel like they're doing better.
Yeah. No, it's such a odd part of the job, right? Is like whenever anything has to go, like you have to do something through the DRE. And typically, like when it requires taking your money, that seems to go very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Anything that has to do with that. But when it's like I need a help or a service or whatever, it seems to be a very drawn out thing. And I don't know the inner workings of the DRE and the Sacramento Association of Realtors. It just seems to be that there's maybe not enough people there to do the amount of work. And you can see this, like if you want to become a realtor and the time it takes from when you submit your application to get a date to do your exam. I've seen people that have waited 4 or 5 months to get that. So that's pretty.
I think they're also really backlogged because of COVID.
Yeah.
I think that slowed them down a lot. I will say, though, that my experience of getting my broker's license and then researching and opening the brokerage has been really positive. You know,
That's
we
good.
have great resources, not only with our local MLS, but the resources at CAR and at the DRE. Everybody I've talked to has been super nice and super helpful. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
been
my favorite interaction that I've had is I'm not really sure my Supra code expired or something like right before I had to go do this showing, and I was like, I really did not know what to do, and so I just called over to the Sacramento Association, and they're like, oh yeah, not a problem, I'll reset it for you right now, and I was like, oh, that was perfect. I thought I was just getting ready to call people and say, hey, we're gonna have to reschedule this thing. So that they do have some good interactions for sure. But we're getting pretty close to the end of the podcast. I just kind of want to get your last feelings on what the market's looking like out there in Reading. What can people expect? I know we're not wizards. We can't tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but you've been in the industry for a while. You kind of know what's going on. Like, what do you expect to see out there in the next 6 months if people are looking to sell or buy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say to your point, we don't have a crystal ball and we're not wizards. Obviously, we can't predict the future, but I do think that we are in an industry that we are expected to make educated guesses. You know, we to some should be able to forecast or predict, within a certain realm of reason. And so one thing that I would say to other agents on that topic is that it's really fun to do what I call like a gut check, where you make a guess about something and then make a note. It could be something as simple as seeing a property come up on the MLS and saying, that looks overpriced or that looks underpriced. What do I think it's going to sell for? And then you check yourself when it sells and you see, was I close? How right was I? If you do that over and over again within any capacity of our business, you will learn to trust your gut, and you'll learn that when your gut says, I'm taking all this data into consideration, this is what I think is going to happen, you'll find that you can then reliably trust your gut. With that said, my educated guess or prediction about this upcoming market, obviously we all know it's very much tied to interest rates. I think that if interest rates don't start coming back down, it's going to continue to affect the sales price of homes. We've already seen home prices up here depreciate. And I think they could depreciate more than what you're reading about in all of the national news sources. Because when you do the math of the difference on a payment for like a 3% interest rate versus a 6% interest rate, that takes that $500,000 buyer and makes them a $350,000 buyer now. So that's obviously a huge disparity between those two
Mhm.
things. So those buyers either just aren't going to buy, or the prices have to start coming down even more. But
Right.
with the lenders that I've spoke to have said that they're predicting that the rates are going to start easing up a little bit and improving starting around March or April. And then hopefully by the end of the year, they may start to taper back down to something that is a little bit more affordable for most people.
Mhm.
And so I think that we're going to have a stronger second half to next year than we traditionally would, because hopefully the rates will be lower. And I think as soon as the rates get to where they're affordable again, buyers are going to start buying because we haven't corrected the inventory crisis yet.
Mhm.
What I'm telling people is if you're in the market to buy right now, I would try to buy within the next 30 to 60 days with the plan to refinance later down the road in a year or two when hopefully the rates are better.
Mhm.
But right now is your opportunity that the sellers are probably, very, very motivated because there's not much buyer activity going on. And they're faced with the cold reality that prices could continue to go even further down. So I think
Mhm.
there's an opportunity for buyers to right now get a really good deal on a house and then refinance later. And then they've positioned themselves to be in a good spot. And for all the people that can't buy right now, or what they want is just not within their reach because of the prices. I think that toward the end of next year, we'll start to see that, easing up a little bit and becoming more affordable.
Yeah, no, I love how you essentially said an educated guess, right? Because at the beginning of 2022, we were on the mortgage side, we were kind of predicting what's it going to look like at the end of 2022, right? And we were essentially saying we thought it was going to be between 8 and 10% based on the Fed's plot charts and kind of what we thought was going to happen because of the stimuluses that went out and the housing shortage and the delays that were happening in new construction. They were wildly like 3, 6, 9 months delayed because of COVID, shipping problems, a lot of different things. And so it was interesting to see towards the end of 2022 when the inflation rate came and it steadied and went down just a little bit, and the Feds essentially didn't raise the rates, and we had a small, I think, 0.5% or 50 basis point adjustment that we were like, oh, okay, it's not going to go up to 8. It's going to stay. And that was kind of that gut check where like, we were really where we're telling people like, hey, like you need to get into something before these rates jump up to 9%. Right. And so they settled and they haven't gone down much, but the Feds are supposed to be meeting pretty soon, and we'll see kind of what happens with that. But it's really interesting, uh, the real estate side, I mostly just follow what's happening in California. But as it pertains to the loan side, I'm following what's happening in China, in the UK, in Canada, as well as California, because all of those markets are seeing significant issues, and the world economy as a whole is affecting what's going on here, especially when you consider all of the information that's been coming out about how there's going to be a huge buy of single family residential by private investors, and how that's going to drive up the market. And it's going to be a really interesting thing to see what happens in the next probably 2 to 3 years. But we've been pretty much saying that we thought that the rates were going to steady and we'd maybe start to see a decline right around April, maybe going into May before our summer sales. And we would see the rates start to drop then, because hopefully in that time, real estate has caught up. I don't think, maybe you can tell me what you've seen there, but I don't think we've seen a full drop yet in the equity that was built over the last 2 years from the rate drops. I want to say here in Sacramento, we're seeing close to about 30 to 40% has dropped.
Yeah. I spoke to a local appraiser in our area the other day, and he said that he's been using about a 1% adjustment per month since June or July.
Okay.
So, that's kind of the basis that I've been working off of.
Right.
It's not been as drastic, but as you probably know, the areas that saw the greatest inflation are the ones that are seeing the greatest depreciation right
Yeah.
now too. So they're very relative. But I
Yeah.
think it's
Well,
something most people to keep in mind is that unless you're specifically an investor, most of us can't really time the market anyway. The market's just going to be whatever it is that
right.
you're in it. Even people that bought at the height of the crash last time recovered all of their value over time. So, if the interest rates are great, you get a better interest rate, but you're going to have a lot more competition, pay a lot more for that home. The great part about right now for buyers is that they can get a much better deal, much better terms, then refinance later. So, I think people just need to remember the market is just what it is, and it's going to have pros and cons no matter what time you're buying or selling.
Yeah, so long as you have a competent realtor and you have a competent loan officer and your team is working together, I think that you can create strategy around any market with the expectation and the knowledge of knowing that a lot of times, and for most people, real estate is not a one transactional deal. You might have to refinance at some point. You might have to do some sort of pulling equity out of your house if you want to expand it. And so understanding that you might not just be done as soon as you buy that property can maybe ease the expectation and understanding. And over the 30 years of owning a property, and granted, this will really depend on when your 30 years ends, if the market's low or high, but statistically, it's always a better investment to own a property in California over 30 years. The returns on it perform higher than having your money in the stock market. I mean, statistically, it's there. So it's an interesting thing. But we are towards the end. I do want to give you the opportunity. I know that you're in a transition right now, and maybe when you do have things up, I can update the profile for this podcast that has your correct stuff. But if somebody does want to reach out to you, if they're interested in joining the team or they're interested in buying and selling out in the Redding area, I'd love to give you the opportunity to give them your contact information, which we also provide in the description of every podcast.
Yeah, the website's going to be up and running as soon as the DRE finishes my application. So that's going to be www.seasonsredding.com. And then I'm on Instagram as Amanda Nardo Realtor and Facebook as Amanda Nardo Broker. So I'm on pretty much every social media, and you can Google my name as well and find me that way.
All right, perfect. So if you guys are looking to buy or sell or become a realtor, or you are a realtor and you want to join this new and upcoming brokerage, reach out to Amanda Nardo out there in the Redding area. Again, thank you guys for being on. This is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. You guys have a great day.